Mob friends! For the last video of the year, we'll paint a facade that I have 3D printed. After giving it the obligatory coat of VMS primer, which not only preps the surface for painting, but also makes all the details nicely stand out, I proceeded to paint the base tones of the stucco with oil paints. It's just another method that I'm experimenting with, and I must say that I'm not entirely sold on this approach. I find the oils to be too smooth for this kind of effect. As such, I wasn't entirely convinced by the result that I was seeing, and even considered stripping the paint down and trying again with acrylics. But then, this beauty finished printing and kinda distracted me. If you're asking where these printed facades come from, well, the video title is definitely a hint, but to sum it up, I learned some basic modeling in Fusion360 and texturing in Blender. Okay, we should probably slow down. It was Saturday evening after I finished editing the Tiger diorama video, check it out by the way, and my studio was a total mess. My fiancée was already sleeping, so I didn't want to wake her up, but at the same time, I was pumped and ready to start creating something new. So I just downloaded Blender, tried modeling in it, hated it, uninstalled it, and downloaded Fusion. Here I was more familiar with the tools, and before I knew it, I have made a brick. The facade I started this video with was my first finished model, so it's definitely not perfect, and it was more of an exercise to get familiar with the functions. The second one is much more detailed and exciting, and actually, the reference image comes from Emmanuel Novalier's book. Each stone was drawn individually, extruded, some fillet added on the edges, and so on. At first, my idea was to model them in this clean, smooth finish, then print them, and add textures using standard, analog modeling methods. But then, Will Paddison told me that I'm using the worst possible program for this type of structure, and that Blender is more ideal because of its sculpting tools. So I thought I could give sculpting in Blender a try, and give it a try I did. I bought different sets of alphas, which are basically texture brushes created from real photographs, watched one tutorial on how to use them, and textured the whole thing. I absolutely love this workflow because it allows me to work on various 3D models in the evenings without cluttering the workbench while I'm working on my main projects. So then I just printed them on my Elegoo Saturn IV Ultra 16K using 3D Jake high detail resin, and that's where we are right now. So let's give this distillery a coat of primer as well. And here the difference is gonna be even stronger because the anthracite resin is quite dark. Aircraft grey for the wall and metal details, and as usual, white for all the wooden parts because that's the best undercoat for faded wood effects. Let's now admire the textures that I have meticulously sculpted in Blender and the overall detail that these modern printers can achieve. I have affiliate link for Elegoo in the description, by the way. Okay, time for some basic colors. And here I don't really know how to give you paint callouts because I pretty much grabbed every gray and sandy tone I have and just went to town. For now, we'll paint everything with a sponge. And, well, this isn't even the effect we're aiming for because each corner of the facade will look completely different, all based on the reference image. But what is important is how much fun this is. And there's no rule. No starting with the darkest tones and finishing with the lightest. It's just about trying to replicate what we see in real life. As such, there are multiple ways to achieve the desired result, and the paint selection can be quite different as well. I just used what I had at hand. However, I had a certain workflow after all. Basically, I slapped some initial tones in place, working in small sections. Then I gave the surface a quick acrylic wash with diluted rubber black, and this paint is actually cool because when diluted, you'll see it has a lot of brown in it. Once this was dry, I added some final tones which, okay, I'll admit it, were mostly light gray and off-white. So yeah, I kinda finished with the lightest colors after all. However, the point is something else. Here, for example, I'm replicating a grimy finish based on the reference image, so right off the bat, during the base coating stage, I'm creating special effects. Also, each rock has a slightly different vibe, and we can keep all of that in check because we're working in small sections. The rubber black wash will give everything a slightly grayish hue, which is excellent, and additional gray tones can be slapped afterward to achieve the general outline of the final effect. I think when the surface has so many different finishes everywhere, it just keeps the workflow more engaging. So that's the first part done, the rocks and the concrete pieces. Let's now use the same colors on the plaster. On this particular section, there was a very specific effect created by moisture that I wanted to get out of the way immediately. My first thought was that it would be easily replicated with chipping fluid and a toothpick, but let's just say that it didn't quite work out. The tentacle-looking patterns were much smoother and bigger than this, so after giving up, I did all of it the old-fashioned way, with brushes. First by adding more of the light color, and then, using the darker tone that's underneath, I added the pattern. It's not an exact one-to-one replica of real life, but the essence is there and that's all that matters to me. Just like with the rocks, every section is slightly different, but the color palette is still the same. I'm just picking different tones to achieve the desired results. One very notable effect here is the giant stain under the roof. Chances are the building may be burnt out at some point in its life, or it's just a massive layer of grime collected over the decades. I've seen it on other ancient buildings, so it's not uncommon. The point, again, is that during this stage, we block out every texture, volume, and effect. And I must say, it already looks pretty mint, doesn't it? But every effect is kinda blurry, so to say, but the essence is already there. So let's now proceed to the second stage, which is all about chipping fluid. Now we're creating sharper, more defined effects seen on the edge surface. I started with the most obvious section of these blocks, which have something that looks like, I don't know, remnants of paint. By the way, the holes in them are chiseled by hand in real life, and they help to hold the cement and plaster in place. Chipping fluid applied with a brush, and subsequent paints that are either stippled with a sponge or brushed onto the surface lead to a very particular look. The chipping is heavier, often hard to control, and the results are not as refined as with airbrush application. But this is exactly what we need on these types of models, because no matter where you look on these old buildings, the chipping patterns are massive. We could go on with multiple layers of chipping, of course, but sometimes a quick pass with a pointy paintbrush for additional effects is more than enough. With this part out of the way, let's create another one. The lower corner with the electric box looks like concrete and has a very strong grayish-blue vibe. I used almost the same colors here, trying to replicate the random patterns, and just quickly chipped it down. The concrete steps are almost black with a few spots of green moss here and there, so again, I used pretty much the same tones, but heavier application combined with the chipping fluid will result in visible worn patches. It's important to wipe away the dirty water that's left after you activate the fluid, otherwise the result will be quite muddy. The plastered walls were kinda similar because the tones used in this step were pretty much the same as in the previous one. Just the application was more methodical, focused on creating clearly defined patches of different colors, which I have then chipped down. Some of the stones have visible white stains, which might just be remnants of plaster, or the cement that's holding them together. This is where standard brush application comes in handy, and chipping gives it that aged, jagged look. Sometimes the effect is really subtle in the end, even I had a hard time seeing a difference in these places, but I made sure to go over each part of the facade with this method. The strongest impact was definitely on the plaster, because here it was necessary to break that sponge-applied look and make it look like countless layers of different color that was chipped away by the elements. The grimy section was really tricky, but as we'll see in the upcoming steps, it was all worth it and the result is gonna be almost perfect. Okay, so that's the second phase done. now we'll attack the surface with enamel washes, and then we'll go over each part with a fine brush and bring out the textures and details. For washes, we'll use these two. Black wash is a very bold choice in every situation, but it plays nicely together with the dark gray washes we use during the initial steps. Old buildings are all kinda grayish and grimy, so it works well with that as well. However, it's not usable in all situations, and some of the shallower textures are better outlined with winter streaking grime. In fact, next time I'll try to skip the black wash altogether and see how it'll look. I varied the tones depending on the depth of the effect, so for example, deep cracks received a black wash and smaller cracks were picked out with winter streaking grime. Until now, all of my facades and miniature buildings were made from styrofoam and putty, and the biggest surprise of this project was how pleasant it was to apply the pin washes. I say it often that this is one of the most relaxing steps on any scale model, but to be honest, it gets old pretty fast and after an hour or so turns into a chore. Sometimes it just becomes downright exhausting. But here, it was extremely refreshing and every bit was fun. Maybe because I was bringing everything that I scratch built in my computer to life. And maybe because some of these textures were invisible until this point. Either way, it's a necessary step, and when we look at the whole facade, it sort of tidied up the different colors. So let's now build on top of this and refine every detail. Here the color palette will be much more limited. First off, I picked out the mortar in the joints. I sculpted it in Blender with the blob paintbrush, and it works excellent because the blob pretty much spills out of the joints, just like real cement. It's also practical because it seals every gap between the blocks, so there's no uncured, hard to remove resin hiding in there. Then I went about my way with outlining the cracks and sharp corners of the stones. Some of the more pronounced textures were picked out as well, but these were hard to see without the pin wash. I'll admit that on one hand, this step is absolutely crucial, but on the other, I still haven't found a good approach to it. When I'm done, it looks more like a fake highlight, something you'd see on a stylized Warhammer painting, and not a facade that tries to look photorealistic. But I'm sure it's just a matter of practice and finding the right motion and angle of the paintbrush. For example, it's one of the best effects you can employ on the damaged plaster. These surfaces are often flat and empty, so painting additional shallow cracks that haven't gotten all the way through yet is a great way of literally breaking these surfaces apart. At this point, I could also refine and finish the grimy area. All the sponged and chipping fluided effects were a foundation for the final effect, which wasn't just about painting vertical streaks with a black acrylic, because I also added opaque stains and random shapes, and heavy accumulations on the upper edges of the cracks. Again, studying the reference material was essential for this result. I was tempted to get it all completed from the beginning, because when I looked at the sponged effect, I knew it just wasn't looking quite right. But oftentimes, you just have to trust the process and be patient. I also tried to avoid using an airbrush, but this large streak is so diffuse on the real building that an airbrush was the only logical choice here. Before we wrap this segment up, let's quickly paint the bricked-in window. On the real building, it's just a black void, but I needed something to close it up. Bricks are still my favorite building material, and I was even able to sign the model with my initials. They were painted using my usual approach, adding different base colors, then some weathering with diluted dust-colored acrylics, a dark pin wash to darken the gaps and outline the spilled mortar, and finally, some careful picking out with a pointy brush. When you're breaking up and opening from the inside, the mortar tends to spill out, so I paid attention to that. This wraps up all the painting steps on the wall itself. It took me a few days, but it was extremely fun, especially the added challenge of replicating the real world. And thanks to that, it was also a huge learning experience. So let's now paint the rusty window. I'm especially proud of this part because it was my first experience with sculpting in Blender. A red-brown base coat followed by some stippled black paint, hairspray chipping and off-white, and then it was just about oil paint rust washes. Super easy, and the result is absolutely out of this world, my friends. For the broken glass, I again used pieces of acetate foil from some packaging box, but I glued them with this special VMS glue for clear parts. It's extremely tacky and can be completely wiped away with their enamel thinner, which means no more messy stains on clear parts. VMS products can be bought with the links in the description, and I also have discount codes for you. Some parts, such as the downpipe, are easier to finish once they're glued to the model. I stippled a bunch of base colors separately, then superglued it in place, and all the weathering effects were applied over a layer of chipping fluid. Especially the grimy areas were much easier to apply this way because I had a clear idea where they were needed and in what amount. The neglected look was then finished with a few rust stains made from blended oil paints, even though in the reference image the pipe looks quite new. Another good example is again the window. I added streaks of rust on the concrete ledge, but to integrate it even further, I dragged them down on the wall as well. Some of the few details I didn't 3D print were the electric cables. These were made from 0.3mm copper wire, the fasteners from strips of lead foil, and the light bulb socket from a stretched plastic rod. This might come as a surprise, but cables are super tedious and it took me longer to paint them than the downpipe. But now we have all the metal details finished, and we can finally focus on the wooden elements such as this tiny door which I painted off screen. And let's take it as an exercise in alternative wood aging methods, because you'd be hard pressed to find more variation in real life than old wood. I was trying to replicate the real life reference as closely as possible, and this meant no enamel or oil base coats, just white primer and stippling with various gray and off-white tones. This might be either some kind of primer for wood in real life, although I doubt it considering its age, or just wood getting extremely sun-bleached that it's simply turned white after several decades. Either way, stippling the basic tones followed by acrylic washes mixed from AK Interactive inks was all I did. It was super simple and the result was pretty nice already. Then I covered it with a generous coat of VMS chipping fluid and proceeded to apply the red paint. The brush has to be semi-dry so that we don't flood the surface and accidentally reactivate the fluid, and this also helps us to sketch some of the worn shapes. All of these high-quality AK paints and weathering products can be purchased with a discount code through an affiliate link down in the description. Each purchase helps me out. Remember the thing I said about chipping and how it leads to noticeably bigger results when we use brushes or sponges? Yeah, well, this is probably the first time when I wasn't exactly blown away with what I was getting, but that's no problem. I wouldn't be able to create this distinct effect in any other way, and we can always go back and refine it further, right? Well, of course. After giving it another coat of chipping fluid, I applied more red with a sponge, because now I wanted to add small flaky bits of paint. The previous layer is hard to move at this point, because after you activate the fluid, the paint sort of bites down after a while. So it's completely safe to layer them on top of each other like this. More concentrated chipping can be done with a pointy brush, such as in the corners where the paint wasn't removed by the elements. And conversely, using white, I picked out all of the worn edges, just like in the reference photo. This was a huge learning experience for me as well, because the effects were completely different than usual, and it allowed me to explore all these additional steps and combine them together. In theory, we could even employ some speckling with white, but I didn't find it even necessary, so I proceeded to tie it all together with an enamel wash using the winter streaking grime. This was like the cherry on top and perfectly captured the bleached and grimy look of the real door. Something, each detail is a small model on its own, am I right? Now I could glue these elements in place with super glue. The advantage of this workflow is that each part fits perfectly and the fit is really tight. I used roughly 0.2mm tolerances for each side and I can't complain one bit. Finally, it was time to complete the wall with some additional fine details such as these metal beams, which I quickly cut and bent from copper foil. Again, it was easier to base coat them separately, but add the final weathering once on the model. I couldn't miss adding a few of my custom-made old enamel signs, which I collected on the internet and sent to a professional printing service. They're excellent just the way they are, but the edges need to be painted, and some of the rust effects can be enhanced with diluted oil paints. This requires a very careful approach because the enamel thinner can easily destroy the print. The result is that the sign is satin, but the rust stains are perfectly matte. Most of my facades have a small base, so I can add this type of clutter, but here the concrete steps fill that role perfectly. All of them are held in place with super glue because at the moment I have no PVA glue and I'm too lazy to go and buy it. I also added a small piece of cracked glass that was fixed with tape. Again, acetate foil, a quick enamel wash, and the tape was painted with acrylics because I don't have brown tape, just green. And finally, we can frame the piece. The edges were quickly painted with black AK acrylic marker, and once centered, the facade was superglued to the MDF backing of the picture frame. I airbrushed the surrounding MDF with black Tamiya paint, further blending the wall with the picture frame, and then I carefully superglued the white paper. Again, PVA would have been better, but what can I do? And once we put it in the frame, I dare to say we have a small art piece in our hands. What do you think? Well, my friends, I'll keep this outro short because I don't have any footage to show you, just a few photos. First off, please let me know what you think about this approach. Also, I'm glad I managed to finish this final video in time because I can wish you a happy new year and truly wish you all the best. Stay healthy, be happy, and I'm sure your dreams will come true in 2026. I hope you had beautiful Christmas and you found some exciting models or tools under the tree. I'll now start working on one of my absolute childhood dream projects. I'm extremely excited about it, and I can assure you I'll pour all of my passion into it. It's gonna be huge and have lots of big wheels. And last but not least, thank you so much for your support this year. If it weren't for you, I don't know what I'd be doing with my life. Definitely not much that could be called meaningful, so to say. So really, thank you from the bottom of my heart. A special shout out must of course go to my patrons, thanks to whom I can do this as my dream full-time job. You'll get a lot of cool stuff if you join. Oh, and I almost forgot, I also have my own personal webpage with all my models, which are for sale, but not this one. And I also have merch, check it out down below. So yeah, Patreon. I post regular updates, share work in progress photos, various thoughts and observations from the workbench, and we keep in touch through DMs, comments and emails. Top tier patrons get early access to all of my videos completely ad-free, and they stay there forever, so if you like listening to them while they're modeling, now you know where to go. There are also bonus extras like 3D printable parts for your own projects, reference photos from real-life locations, and high-res studio shots of my models that show way more detail than video ever could. Your financial support is appreciated, but never expected. Now that I mentioned 3D files on my Patreon, I don't even know what to do with these digital facades. The files are too big, each over 2 gigabytes, and I never made them with commercial plans in mind, so yeah, I still don't know. Anyway, thank you again, Happy New Year, and remember, build your models, don't just hoard them. I'll see you in January. Cheers!